powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher's in the house today. NFL free agency is underway. It officially can be official on Wednesday, but all the leaks are out now. You can sign, you can talk, you can basically get the news out, but the contracts will consummate on Wednesday. All right, Geoff Mosher's here, Mike and Ryan live at the Gallery Bar booking games at Ocean Casino Resort. We started the day with a flurry, Geoff Mosher. It's kind of slowed down a little bit here, at least for the Eagles. I know things is happening. So let's start at the top and get your thoughts. TJ Edwards, a 3-year deal. He is a Chicago Bear. Thoughts on Edwards to Chicago and how Philadelphia may replace him?
Well, to start off, it wasn't surprising there was a market for T.J. Edwards coming off the year that he had. Linebackers always seem to be in high demand in free agency. The interesting thing about linebackers, always in high demand, especially off-the-ball linebackers, usually get decent contracts, but a lot of them don't work out. It's kind of funny because linebackers can be very scheme-specific. But T.J. just had a really good year. Chicago is his hometown. So we were told, in the weeks leading up to free agency that TJ would have several offers, that the Eagles, would be in on it, but if there was a good offer, not as likely to match unless he was willing to kind of come and take the Eagles' offer. Now, the surprising thing is, you look at the deal, it doesn't seem like he blew the market up by any stretch of the means. He got a nice offer, but it wasn't, just like one of those offers where you're like shocked at what he got, but it was still good money, and the Eagles are obviously have, to answer the second part of your question, they have Nakobe Dean waiting in the wings there. So it looks like that's, again, Howie Roseman talks about playing the comp pick game, and this is a contract that's good enough to get them something in return next year, 2024 draft.
All right, so he goes, we think Dean. Does that mean to you, Geoff Mosher, that Kaiser White will be back and that it'll be a White and Dean linebacking core, and is that good enough?
Well, will it be Kaiser White? Decent chance because he knows the team, he knows the system here, and he will not. He's not one of the top 5 to 8 linebackers on the market, so it's very possible you can bring him back on another 1-year deal, or if he signs elsewhere, they can go and try the 1-year stopgap linebacker thing again. It's interesting that I don't know if this has any bearing on it, but the new linebackers coach from Temple, Elliott, his first name is it J.D. Elliott? DJ Elliott actually coached Davion Taylor at Colorado. He was a defensive coordinator when Davion Taylor was there, so maybe there'll be some influence, and Davion is still technically on the team, even though he was waived and put on the practice squad. He was re-signed to a futures deal. But, that's a position that that the Eagles can and will sort of get economical.
When you saw the deal that he got, should Philadelphia have tried to match that or tried to bring him back, or was it one of these things where they just said, okay, see ya?
I mean, I guess it surprised me a little bit. I know that they don't historically play linebackers. The last one they did was Nigel Bradham when they gave him that 1-year extension. It wound up not quite being $8 million. It was a little under that, but they didn't have 20 other free agents at that time to work with. So I without knowing what their sort of total defensive or overall free agent strategy looks like, it's not that surprising, but I did think that the number for TJ might be a little better. It's funny because I talk to agents a lot about this. When you do really well as an undrafted free agent or a 6th or a 7th round pick, it's really interesting how teams try to go and get those players, whether on the market or re-signings, even after really good years, but sort of still treat them like they're undrafted free agent, like there's something that's not right about them, that they don't deserve the top money. You see that a lot with guys who, so let's say they're a 5th or a 6th or 7th round pick and they have 3 good years and the team's trying to extend them. They try to sort of treat them like, hey, we know what you really are, though, in the end. And I just think that's sort of fascinating. If TJ Edwards was a 3rd round pick and had the exact same career, you wonder if the Eagles would have ponied up more money or if he'd done even better on the marketplace.
Mosh, what's the what's the outlook for the upcoming 2023 season from the standpoint of the front office and ownership? Because, we've heard in the past, retool, rebuild, we're going for it, right? Because that plays probably not a huge factor, but that certainly plays a factor in how they're going to proceed with who are we going to try and pay, who are we going to try and, move on from, et cetera.
So what you're asking is where do you think they go from here? Sort of.
Well, is it a rebuild in their mind? Like, are they looking at 2023 saying because of all these free agents, we are going to be, realistic and say this may be a slight step back. We have to bring in some younger guys that we're going to draft, maybe 2 rookie corners, maybe a little bit lighter up front, et cetera.
Yeah, I do think that there's an objective here on Howie's part, Ryan, to get younger and probably a little bit faster. I think that this defense was good last year, obviously, but in the back end from middle line, from linebacker on to corner to safety, it's not necessarily a lot of 4-4 guys there in the back end. So but to your point, and I've never covered an Eagles team with Howie Roseman as the GM or even Joe, where they were waving a white towel, so to speak. Right. In fact, if you think about this team last year at this time, or maybe 3 weeks into free agency, it was sort of looking like their corners are Darius Slay and Zach McPherson, right? Because they hadn't had Bradbury yet, and Steve Nelson walked. And then their safety picture was looking like Jaquaski Tart and Marcus Epps. So I'm sure everybody felt the same thing, like, oh, man, Howie is really rebuilding here as they sort of, quote-unquote, try to figure out what Jalen Hurts is. And that wound up not being the case when they brought in Bradbury and traded for CJ, and Jalen had a good year. So Howie knows this team is very good, and he knows this offense should be one on paper that scores a lot of points. I think anybody would be, rational in thinking that their defense this year may not be as good as last year because of the change, but it doesn't have to be bad. It could still just be a pretty good defense instead of a top 3 defense. But again, there'll be moves that I would assume that Howie makes all the way up till the start of the season that are meant to improve the ball club from the draft to late free agency to the trade market out in training camp.
Talk about the guys that are on the roster already, that were on the roster this past season, that didn't get a lot of playing time. Like, the Blankenships of the world. I saw Andrew DiCecco wrote an article titled The Replacements, right? So talk about those guys and how that factors into the decision-making right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard sometimes with these guys who are pencil them in. But, obviously the Eagles do have high hopes for Nakobe Dean. He'll be ready to step into the limelight here at linebacker. A guy like Josh Jobe is a kid that they felt if things were a little bit different for him in college, on and off the field, maybe he would have been drafted. I think they got him as a rookie free agent. He had a nice year on special teams. He's got some hybrid ability, corner ability, safety ability, so he'll get an opportunity, you would think, depending on what happens here at corner. Same thing with Reed Blankenship. We saw him play last year. We know he can hold his own. Maybe he's the type of guy who gets exposed if he has to be a starter for the full time. But at very least, you can sort of, if you lose Epps and CJ Gardner-Johnson, then Blankenship's going to get a chance to be a number 2 or a number 3 safety for the team. And you can be somewhat encouraged by some of the things you saw as a rookie. I know Andrew wrote about Zach McPherson. He was high on Zach coming out of Texas Tech, higher, I should say, on Zach than maybe even the Eagles, because they really haven't given him much opportunity. And I myself have some doubts, even though he did start his career off at Penn State. But, maybe a guy who could play the slot. I don't know if he's going to manage on the outside, but again, he might get some opportunities depending on what happens here.
All right, Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Let's go to Hargrave. 4 years, $84 million. I mean, we're not surprised that he got a lot of money. But I guess the question is, are we surprised at who was the team that swooped in there and took him? San Francisco. He adds to that defense now. And then, what does that leave Philadelphia with Hargrave gone?
So a lot of people felt that Hargrave's likeliest destination was with a team that was bad and trying to get better, because those teams usually have a lot of money. But if you study the landscape of the league the last few years, and I'm sort of kicking myself for not bringing this up in the pod, teams that also spend money and are willing to be ultra aggressive are good teams that have quarterbacks on rookie contracts, right? The Jacksonville Jaguars are a great example of that last year. You know, they're not like the Niners in that they were coming off a horrible year, but the point is they had a quarterback that they really liked under a rookie deal, and they wanted to surround him with talent. And the Niners, we know, have multiple quarterbacks under rookie deals, whether it's Brock Purdy or Trey Lance. So they still don't have to spend a ton of money at that position, and they're still trying to win. So they make a very aggressive move, kind of like when the Eagles a couple of years ago signed Javon Hargrave from Pittsburgh. They gave him a really good deal considering he wasn't even a starter there because they had a quarterback at the time who was on a rookie. I think that's when they signed him, that they had either it was Carson in year 2 or 3 of that extension, or it was Jalen Hurts, whatever, but they were able to make that happen and got him at a price. So you always have to beware of teams that have money to spend and have a quarterback on a rookie contract, because they will be aggressive, and the Niners were. And that front four rush now of Bosa, Hargrave, Eric Armstead, and maybe Javon Kinlaw will start playing well for them one day. That's going to be pretty rough.
Yeah, that's a tough one to kind of swallow because of where he's going, and I guess that really comes back down to then you're anticipating. We'll get into Slay in a minute here. You're anticipating losing Bradbury. Do you think Bradbury is a goner?
I'm not 100% sold he's a goner. Jamel Dean is younger, and so some teams may value a younger corner. It's not like Bradbury is a 4-4 guy either. He's specifically meant for certain systems. Like I would say 70-30 goner, because it's not like there's a ton of corners on the market. But I know that the Eagles want to see what the market is for him, and maybe they get a shot there at the end if it's realistic. And the fact that there's been very little movement in the corner and safety market now is a little interesting to me.
Right. So then Hargrave walks. Let's say Bradbury walks. Would you say they're more inclined to replace one of those guys with the 10th pick in the draft?
Would I say they are more inclined to? Well, I think that they'd be inclined to do it anyway, but if you're asking me if the 10th pick in the draft has a good shot at being a corner or a defensive lineman, I would say yes, but I'd probably say that almost every year for this team too. So, yes, I think that's a good shot.
What are the chances they even pick at 10, Geoff Mosher?
Well, I think they would love if Anthony Richardson made it to 10.
Are you kidding
me?
Be
able to, I know, not to pick him, but to be able to trade down and get a haul for it. Yeah. Come on. Not to pick him. But because everybody says, well, the Eagles should move down from 10. And my counter is that, well, who wants to move up to 10? For who? Right? If it's not a quarterback, is there a pass rusher? Sounds like the main guys are going to be gone in the top 5, 6, 7, whether it's Carter or Anderson or Tyree Williams. So you got to, maybe someone moves up to 10 for Bijan. It's a good question. But
I wouldn't be
I'm sure
shocked.
The Eagles would love that scenario.
I wouldn't be shocked if the Bears took Bijan at 9 now.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. Or if they went with an offensive lineman, because they haven't yet signed. Well, no, they did, didn't they? Yeah, they signed Nate Davis. He's a good signing, but they could still use more help on the O-line.
I know the offense, there's really not a lot of attention and buzz around the offense right now for the Eagles because it's all good, for the most part. But Penn State guy Miles Sanders, just real quick, your thoughts. Any chance he's back in Philly?
Oh, chance, yes. I mean, it's all about the market, right, Ryan? Like, if the market doesn't look good, and it should look good for him and David Montgomery because they're two really decent running backs, and there are teams with money. But if teams don't want to spend on running backs this year, if they want to take their shot on getting either Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs, or it's a pretty deep running back class in the draft, and they're just not willing to spend more than like the $5 or $6 million that, like I guess James Conner got like 6 from the Cardinals a couple of years ago. If they're not going to be in on that, then all of a sudden that's an opportunity for the Eagles to sort of swoop in, no pun intended, and maybe get Sanders at a real discount rate. But you get any higher than that, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to let him go.
Jason Kelsey's coming back. How does that affect the cap, free agency? Now that he's back, you got to pay him, I'm imagining, a decent amount of money. I mean, does that alter their off-season plan, or was that something they were probably planning for?
Yeah, I think they were probably expecting it. I think, in general, it looks like they weren't going to have Isaac Seumalo back, knowing he's probably going to reset the market here. I didn't see what Nate Davis signed for. I know it was a 3-year deal. I'm very curious to see the figures on that because I expect that Seumalo will do really, really well. And with that, knowing that, then you've got Cam Jurgens, your second-round pick from this year, who didn't play. Going to have to train him at right guard and get him ready to go in there. And I think that they were completely expecting that when they drafted Jurgens, knowing that Kelsey might come back another year and knowing that Seumalo was up on the final year of his deal.
So would you surmise that they definitively want Jurgens to play guard, or are they going to try to get a veteran actual guard?
Yes and yes. You never can be sure that a guy's going to acclimate to a position. Remember, he hasn't even played center all that long. I think he started off in Nebraska as a tight end and converted to center and played there for either 2 years or maybe 3. So I'm sure that they're going to have a backup veteran guard just in case. I mean, they would anyway, because you can never be sure. And maybe they'll, but I don't suspect. I think that they understand that as a second-round pick, they have to get this guy on the field if he can play, or else it's a waste of 2 years of his deal. So I imagine he'll get the first shot at right guard.
Yeah. So by the way, the Bears have signed T.J. Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. So they've got 2 new linebackers in Chicago. There you go. You look like you were a little surprised by that.
Well, it's sort of not surprising me that it's the Bears. Like, they're a weird team. They spend money on positions that other teams don't prioritize as much. Like, you remember that year they signed like Pisa, I can never pronounce it, Pisa Tina Samoa, the linebacker, and then they signed a running back that year for an ungodly amount of money, and he wound up getting hurt. It wasn't even that good. He was like one of those big bruisers. But they're always seemingly signing free agents at like the non-value positions. Like, again, they signed a guard here.
By the way,
not that they don't need one.
Linebacker Tremaine Edmonds got 4 years, $72 million with a $50 million guarantee.
That's
the
insane.
largest 4-year contract for an inside linebacker ever.
That's stupid.
Wow. Now I will say, with their defensive coordinator, who's their head coach, it's Eberflus. The linebacker is very important in his system. You saw how it was with Darius Leonard or Shaq Leonard in Indianapolis, but again, you got to rush the passer in this league, and you need a quarterback, and you got to have some weapons and some linemen and offensive linemen on the perimeter. And right now, the Bears tackles and the Bears pass rushers don't look so good to me. So I feel for Justin Fields.
What happens with Slay?
What happens with Slay? Well, tell me his leverage. I know his money's not guaranteed this year.
Well, he didn't ask to be traded. He didn't ask to be traded. He's not looking for leverage.
Right, but he wants more money. True, and
true.
It's like, girl, great, but why would the Eagles give you more money if they don't have to? Is he going to hold out at 33 years old? That would be an interesting move on his part. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I mean,
do they
my
trade
sense
him?
is that if the Eagles, only if the Eagles are going to get something good for him. I mean, I don't think they're going to give him away.
Well, based on the Jalen Ramsey trade, that would tell me they're not getting that much.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they got a third for him, I think that they would do it because that's the Eagles don't have a third, fourth, and a fifth, correct? So
right. I'm saying,
if
they got a fourth, would that be enough to say, hey, we got a 4th round pick to replenish that for a 32-year-old still productive player?
And you get the money.
No, I think you'd have to be like a 4, and then you're paying some of that salary. Well, I don't even know if that, because his salary is automatically going to go to the team that trades from anyway, and then bonus money is going to drain to the Eagles that the other team cannot, I believe, compensate. So I think the most likeliest scenario, if he's not on the team, guys, is it would be something after June 1st, unless they get a great draft pick for this year, which I don't think they're going to get anything first, second, or third round, which I can't imagine. Unless that happens, then see what the Eagles do. If they draft a couple of corners or trade for one that's economical and they start to rebuild it and it looks like Darius Slay is a guy who can start for them, but also could be expendable because they've brought in some talent, then look for at the, in training camp, end of training camp, maybe a deal is consummated then. That's the way I would see it.
Geoff Mosher, InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast. I'm sure the downloads are up this week as everybody wants to know what you guys are hearing over at InsideTheBirds.com. And you can
it's
check
the
out
most
the
wonderful
podcast.
time of the year.
It's crazy, isn't it? All right, Moshe, she's back on Wednesday here on the Sports Bash on Football at 4. Thanks, Moshe.
All right, fellas, have a good one.